Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 186 of the Citrix session. I'm your host, Bill Sutton. I have a one person that's a frequent participant in the podcast with me. That's Todd Smith. Todd, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure thing, Bill. Hey, Todd Smith here from Citrix. I'm the account technology strategy manager for the U.S. and North American public sector team. Excited to be here. I'm actually today I'm in Arlington, Virginia, getting ready for our Citrix Connect event, which is tomorrow and the next day. It's going to be attended by about 150 customers and partners in the DC area. So looking forward to seeing everyone who can attend, and looking forward to also being able to share some of the great content moving forward. But Bill, I know we're going to be catching up tomorrow, hopefully.
We are. I'm one of those 150 plus people that'll be there. So like we were talking about before we started, it's going to be a very long day for me. Being in Richmond, I've just decided to drive up in the morning. So hopefully DC traffic will cooperate, and I'll get there well with enough time to make it to the venue from the parking deck that I booked using Spot Hero, by the way.
Great product.
Yeah. Also with us is a new member of the podcast family, and that's our solutions architect at XenTegra, Randy Price. He's our guest today due to the content that we're going to be covering, but there's nothing to stop him from attending future podcasts. Randy, you want to introduce yourself real quick to the listeners?
Sure. Hi, my name is Randy Price. I'm a solutions architect from our modern workspace practice. So I report to Bill. Really focused on the end user compute space, right? So, and that encompasses, of course, Citrix and all the other technologies that kind of complement that as well. So, been working with Citrix since the WinFrame days. So, it's been quite a while. I guess you can say since it was in black and white, right? That's kind of the joke some of the guys make sometimes. So, yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you and appreciate your willingness to participate. I think if we have listeners on here who are XenTegra customers, they know the voice of Randy and probably have worked with him on scoping or some other things relative to some of the services that we sell, the products that we sell. So I'll probably be a familiar voice to a lot of people. But if you're not a customer, then you'll hopefully one day encounter Randy in the course of working with us. So the topic for today is a rather timely one. Many of you probably have received or did receive an email from Citrix directly, and you might very well have also received one from us at XenTegra detailing some changes to the licensing system that Citrix is using going forward. This actually doesn't take effect, and we'll get into the more detail, but it doesn't take effect officially until April of next year. But we want to make sure that all of our customers are informed and begin getting ready for this change. So we are basing the podcast on a blog article like we normally do. The blog article is entitled "Elevating Your Citrix Experience: Innovation, Efficiency, and the Future of Licensing" by Jose Agustin of Citrix. So the blog article itself kind of starts off with some of the background of what why Citrix is doing this. Todd, you want to go into some of the introductory stuff here for us?
Sure thing, Bill. A couple things. First of all, great article here. It's actually Joe's Augustine.
Joe's. Oh, amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. So Joe's has had a lot of responsibility here within Citrix. His latest task that was thrown at him was figure out a way to do licensing so it's more efficient and more effective for not only customers but also for Citrix as a whole.
Yeah.
To have visibility into what's being used and what are the critical features and how often they're being used, because that's going to help us determine what not only the investment dollars where they're spent, but also where customers are having some problems with things like adoption or where they're having issues around running older versions that continue to need support or need extended support from a variety of different vendors that are out there. So with this, we really keeping in mind that we're looking to deliver unparalleled value, be able to allow customers to be empowered and be able to manage a platform. You look at it across the board as Citrix is a platform technology, right? It's got a variety of different tools that can be layered up on that platform, but more importantly, being able to have those insights into where it's being used, who's using it, and why, and what they're doing with it, with the platform capabilities, right? So having this brought forth a change in the way we're looking at some of our licensing. The traditional ways of doing a license key and a license file that gets created based on that key and then has to be associated with an individual host name. And every single time you need to go and reallocate those licenses to a new host, there was a variety of different challenges and problems that came with that methodology. This is not a methodology change that is unique to Citrix. A lot of our other ecosystem partners are doing a very similar approach towards this. And it's taking that subscription-based licensing model, right, and being able to migrate it towards more of a real-time consistent behavior-based modeling for licensing.
Yeah, so I mean, good points, very good points, Todd. And in the article itself, relative to the modern architecture, it does talk a good bit about the license file and no longer really needing those. And I think that one of the keys is you still need a license server, right? You still need a server on premises, but really all that license server is doing is enforcement to some degree, but it's communicating with the cloud-based license server, which then when there's a renewal, when you renew your SKUs, like every year, every 3 years, every 5 years, if you're on-prem, and that's a thing we should bring up right now before I get too deep in this. If you're a DAS customer, this doesn't really affect you unless you are running PVS on premises, you run Unicon, you're running XenTegra, you're running NetScaler, and I'm leaving something out probably. Yeah, basically that's what it boils down to. If you're running Citrix DAS in the cloud and you're using gateway service and you're using VDAs on premises on a hypervisor other than XenTegra, and you're not using PVS, you likely don't need to worry about this unless you're using some of the new features, new additional features included in the Universal Hybrid Multi-Cloud license. Correct?
Correct.
Correct. So obviously, some of the benefits of this, I'm no longer, like you said, Todd, having to manage the license file, automatically getting updates to your entitlements based on when they're renewed. They are there and available to you. And then, of course, we don't have that license server as a single point of failure for user sessions, which helps improve the stability of the environment. Randy, you want to comment on here? Maybe talk about some of the way this works and the way you get this going?
Yeah, I was just going to mention too, going back to what you said about the no more license file requirement, right? So I typically will perform a lot of our Citrix micro assessments, which is a free offering for a lot of our customers, right? Or complimentary offering. And I can tell you the number of times I've went to a customer and they have went through the renewal, but they have not downloaded and implemented that updated license file, right? Sort of indicating that. So as they move forward with the newer upgrades and things of this nature, and this is traditionally those CVAD customers that are running on-prem,
right?
Those sort of scenarios, this is really going to help, really help to rectify some of those issues, especially as they go through upgrades and the warnings that were typically coming up right prior to Citrix adding some of that into the workflow for the upgrades. Users would go through and they would attempt to upgrade and then realize, oh, my license file is not working, right? And so then they would have to go and download. So this is really going to help to also rectify some of that as well. But it's there's a couple of things. One, to go through this process, and again, there's several different products that you just mentioned that were impacted, right? Traditionally, anything running on-prem is really what we're focused on, and that could be, whether it's CVAD or PVS or NetScaler or XenTegra or Unicon. There's a couple of different things, right? We want to make sure, one, that we're running a supported version, and I think we'll probably talk about that here in a moment, the versions across the stacks there, what is required, and that we are we're taking advantage of that. We're updating our license server. And for the NetScaler aspect, we're running a version of NetScaler console as well that's supporting the license activation service. So we go through this process. We're going to register, perform that one-time registration. Now, it says it's a one-time registration, but I'll probably put a little asterisk there with a caveat in the sense that if your license server, and Citrix actually calls this out, if your license server changes for any reason, maybe the MAC address changes, the FQDN changes, things of that nature, it will require you to go back through and re-register, if you will, right? So there's some more things to be aware of. It is a one-time registration, but if any of those sort of things change on that license server or NetScaler console, if you're running on-prem, you will need to go back through and re-register. So, and then you're just going to activate the service. So actually the way, you kind of look through this, the license activation or registration with the license activation service is fairly simple, right? It's really the customer's preparing to ensure that they're running a version that is supported by the license activation service, whether it be CVAD or PVS or, the NetScaler/NetScaler console, if they're running that on-prem, to be able to support that. So that's some things that customers will just have to take into account from a migration planning perspective.
Yeah, so one key thing here that we probably should call out that I think we've mentioned somewhat is this is a mandatory transition. So if you do nothing, then on April 15th, if you have an on-premises environment on April 15th, 2026, the legacy licensing will essentially cease to function, or you will no longer have support if you attempt to run it with an older license file. Presumably an older license file would be tied to an older version. So yeah, you can certainly do that, but not recommended at all because you're not going to have support for that and you're not going to get patches and other such things. So the best thing to do is get it upgraded to the newest version. We'll talk about those in a few minutes, before April 15th of 2026, to get this put in place.
Bill, you probably should mention as well, right? Because we're talking about on-prem environments. We have some customers that may have an air-gapped environment, and how do they handle that
Good point.
sort of scenario?
Yeah, and my understanding, Todd, do you know? I have a general understanding, but I just didn't know if you knew any more.
This sounds like an ideal public sector question. But yes, realizing there are some customers in the public sector, but also in the private sector as well, that runs in a air-gapped environment where they don't have connections to do a license activation directly over the internet, right? So we do have an option that's available. It has to go through an approval process for that. You just can't say, hey, we're not going to allow this to connect in. There has to be some justification done for that, but it will allow you to have what's called dark site or dark mode, which basically allows you to have a license file that actually gets downloaded to your license server, as long as there are, it still has to have a valid license in the entitlement. But there are some options available. There's an option available for customers who are not allowed to connect to any of the clouds or any of the cloud services. Very similar to what we've done with some of our telemetry information, right? There are very similar customers that don't allow telemetry to go off-site or off their network. So we do have some options available. But once again, it is on a case-by-case basis, and we will kind of make sure that we work with the customer directly on how to make that happen.
And with those, and Todd, just because one thing that comes to mind, right, when we talk about that from an air-gapped environment, is the same sort of requirements going to be in play as far as the customer has to have one of these updated versions, being able to support license activation service, but also being able to take advantage of that exception, if you will, if it gets approved from Citrix.
Yeah, that's a critical part, right? We want to make sure the customers can continue to use our product and maintain a level of support for that. We're not looking to say, hey, you can't meet these requirements, so you're not allowed to do it. But we want to make sure that, we're the air gapped or the telemetry exceptions are there for a reason. So we can certainly do that.
Yeah, and another thing that I've read, Todd, and keep me honest here, is if you, as a customer, renew your license today, it's going to have a term date of April 15th, 2026. If it's an on-prem, if you do an on-prem license, assuming you can even get that anymore. But if you get a license file today from the license system, if you're able to do that, it would be termed April 15th, 2026. So you will have to register with the license activation service by then. Ideally, what we're recommending is that customers go ahead and get ahead of this and start the process now. Get their license server upgraded, make sure their versions are their products are at the right version numbers, and go ahead and register with the service and get it in place so that you have nothing to worry about in April of next year.
Correct. And part of that registration is going out and making sure you can actually connect to that license activation service,
right?
To be able to make sure that's a clean environment. Because the thing is, almost every single customer has some uniqueness around things like firewall settings and access controls and things like that. We want to make sure that we have, well, we're looking at more than 6 months of planning of time between now and April 15th. So, you do have some time to get prepared and things like that.
Yeah. So
we're looking at 7 months out as of today.
Exactly. Yeah. So another consideration that I was thinking of while you were talking is that you want to make sure that with the firewall ports that are to be open, need to be open. The other thing is you'll need to register if you're not already registered with Citrix Cloud. Make sure you have an account there and get registered with Citrix Cloud, because you'll need that to connect the license server to activate the license server between the on-prem and the cloud. So some customers that might be on-prem that have never had a cloud account will need to register for and leverage that account to activate the service.
Yep. And every customer who's running universal hybrid multi-cloud, or even some of our old DAS customers, they have an active cloud account. Yeah. All they need to do is sign into it.
Sign in.
It does bring forward a couple of additional benefits. If you're connecting to the cloud control plane and the cloud consoles, it's a great place to go and get updated information. There's a very proactive capability built into it for notifications around, hey, there's notifications around updated product changes, vulnerabilities, new support bundles that are out there, a variety of different tools that can be accessed via that cloud control plane and that cloud console.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to bring one other thing. That's really the end of the blog article, but I wanted to bring one other thing up here. We at XenTegra, as I mentioned, some of you on listening to this may have received an email from us that points to a landing page we have on our website that covers this new change, or this change. And I know we wanted to talk about version requirements. Randy, you want to go through this at all? Maybe talk briefly about version requirements that we have posted there, and then maybe one or two other things under the planning section.
Sure. Yeah, I can cover that. So again, whether you're using Citrix for private cloud or UHMC, and you're utilizing some of these entitlements on-prem, or maybe you've went through a renewal, still a Citrix DAS customer, right? Depending upon what your entitlement is and which one of these solutions you're running on-prem, there's just some things to take into consideration. One being the license server. So if you're using Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops, or Xen Server, right, or PBS, all those will point to a license server. So we need to make sure we're running 11.17.2, build 51,000 or higher. So that's the first thing, right? And that's going to allow us to, again, register with the license activation service. That also means, though, from a supportability perspective, and to take advantage of that and some of the code that's been changed to support the license activation features on the Citrix side, on the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops, the current release needs to be 24.11 or higher. Or on the LTSR, if you're running an LTSR version, the supported LTSR versions are 2203 CU7, 2402 CU3, and of course the latest 2507. The license activation service has been incorporated into all of those as well. I'll skip the NetScaler and jump down to the Xen server, just because all of these kind of tie into the license server piece, right?
So, right.
On the license server side as well, or excuse me, the Zen server side, we want to be running version 8.4 with updates dated after, dated August 21st, 2025, early access, or after August 28th, right? Either normal normal or offline, do support the last service as well. And then as well, we need to make sure we've updated XenTegra, to 2025.3 or later. If you're running Unicon Scout, it's 2508 LTSR or later for supportability. And if you scroll back up on the NetScaler side, and we talked about PVS, right? And that's really utilizing from a CVAD perspective as well. On the NetScaler side, on the ADCs, there's a couple of different firmware versions here: 14.1, 51.x, 13.1.60.x on the firmware side. If you're using FIPS, you've got a FIPS-based appliance, that's 13.1.37.x will support the LAS service as well. If you're running NetScaler console on-prem, right, that's 14.1.51.x as well. And NetScaler console service, that's going to be in the notes that was released from the FAQ specifically from Citrix, was going to be updated automatically. So you guys don't really have to worry about any of that if you're using the NetScaler service. So you need to make sure your NetScalers themselves have been updated, those instances. And the SPM as well sort of follows the same.
So we will include a link to this article in the show notes, the podcast notes. I'll make sure that Chase adds that in. So you should be able to see it in the notes on your podcast service of choice. A few things we pointed out in this article, some timelines and milestones, obviously between now and the end of Q4 of this year. Customers really need to do discovery planning, version gap analysis, and then firewall and connectivity validation, like Todd mentioned, making sure that you can reach the license activation service. And then Q1 26 at the latest, that's the latest you should start doing this. Make sure you get upgrade projects in motion, get registered with LAS. Nothing to say you can't do this earlier. You could start doing this tomorrow, to be honest. And then test and validate, and then be prepared to have everything cut over before April 15th, 2026.
That's great.
And then, of course, we talk about how XenTegra can help. We can help with, obviously, any planning or assessment. We can help customers execute this, and then help understand how to work with it going forward. So one thing we haven't discussed that we probably ought to, and hopefully one or both of you guys, I think you both will know the answers. I'll get mixed up on them, so I'm not going to try. What happens if the license server goes down or becomes unavailable? What happens to my CVAD environment? I know customers are going to ask that.
Todd, do you want to take that one, or?
Sure. So we have had a capability called localhost cache for a long period of time, right? Which basically says that if my on-prem environment loses a connection, or if I somehow lose my connection to my license server, current connections are still maintained via that localhost cache. That capability is staying around. What this also allows us to do is the license activation service allows us to very quickly spin up additional license servers and deploy them into a customer's environment without having to go through, going through any of the changes to the licensing model itself, right? So being able to go and say, I need to deallocate the license from this server and move it over to another license activation server makes that very streamlined.
Right. So one of the things it says in one of the linked articles to the blog article is that if the endpoint, which I presume the endpoint is the on-prem license server, if that becomes unreachable by CVAD or some other product, like Todd said, with the concept of the local host cache, it caches a license file and it will operate for up to 30 days until you bring another license server online, or that one becomes reachable again. So kind of a similar thing to what we've seen in the past. If you go back 10 years when all we had was an on-prem environment, that was generally the rule, was 30 days of functionality in the absence of a license server. If you go to the 31st day, then you're going to have an issue. Users won't be able to access it in all likelihood.
Yeah, Bill, I think the interesting thing is that, we're we're now introducing a lot of fault tolerance built into just the service itself, as opposed to having to go out and have a fault tolerance solution across each one of my customer environments, right? The service is now fault tolerant, as are most cloud services, where you don't have to worry about, do I have a DR plan? Do I have a backup and recovery plan? Right? It's one less thing that a customer has to worry about. At the same time, it's also giving the telemetry information and the who, what, when, and how the customers or the users are actually utilizing the system. We've seen a lot of customers ask for things like, well, I have to implement a chargeback model, or I'm moving towards a shared services model. The key components of those is you have to have active and accurate telemetry information that you can utilize and you can feed into your accounting system to do things like chargebacks, or being able to say, hey, this is how much a user session or a user accessing a published application, this is how frequently they're using it. Compare that to things like the cost model associated with that.
Right. Certainly. So that we're at the end of the article and some of the other things that we had prepared for today. So I just wanted to mention one last thing before we close out. This event to update licensing and register with the online service is a good time to reevaluate your environment. And what I mean by that is if you're an on-premises, fully on-premises customer with on-premises licensing, like the old CVAD licensing, or what they call Citrix for private cloud today, it's a good time to make sure you've got all your patches installed and make sure that everything's up to date before you do make this switch, so you don't have any issues. And if you're a UHMC customer with an on-prem environment, obviously the same principle applies, but you're also entitled to a lot of things you may not know you're entitled to. Things for monitoring like Uber Agent, or a thin client operating system like Unicon, some more security capabilities with device trust, and various other things that I'm leaving out. But nevertheless, we can help you understand your entitlements, how to take advantage of them, how to get them implemented, how to do POC if you want to do a POC of any of these. So this is a great time to do that. So please let us help you. You can always reach out to your XenTegra account rep, or you can reach out to myself or Randy. And obviously you can reach out to Citrix if you have questions about any of these entitlements, of course, always. So that's all I had, guys. Do you have any final thoughts? Todd?
Yeah, I think having an opportunity to do some assessment and assessing of the current environment and moving forward is always a good thing to do. I can't tell you the number of times customers have reached out and said, "Hey, what's this new feature do?" Or how come I haven't got this running yet? Or how come what entitlement do I need to do this? And most customers are on universal hybrid multi-cloud, which means they pretty much have almost everything that's available. There's a few things that are add-ons for a platform license, but for the most part, everything customers need are in their current entitlement. And they're just not using things like watermarking or session recording. Those are capabilities that most customers don't have an idea about what it would take to actually turn that on, and what the value of having those things are. And then also being able to take an assessment and say, where are my gaps in my coverage? What am I running as far as legacy applications, or there's an opportunity to stabilize, optimize, and modernize.
Yep, absolutely. Randy, you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna tail in onto what Todd was saying there. Specifically, I kind of mentioned earlier the complementary micro assessments, right? So I definitely want to bring that up again, because to your point, that's one of the things I typically engage with customers on, is just talking around what's included in their entitlements, whether it's, like you said, session recording, workspace environment manager, device trust, right? All of those newer acquisitions as of late with Unicon and Uber Agent as well, and how they play into, customers' environment and the benefits that they get by utilizing those services. So definitely, if there's anyone interested in that, be sure to sign up for one of those. You can reach out to your XenTegra rep if you you are interested in pursuing those, or there's more information on our website as well. But and going back to the license activation piece, like I said, really this is a pretty simple sort of change, if you will, from a licensing perspective, in the sense that we're just going out and activating. The more the planning is around just ensuring that we're running the correct versions, right, to be able to support this, and that we're taking that. And so that typically will require a little bit of planning, ensuring that we're running supported versions, ensuring that we have the firewall rules in place and things of this nature. And again, we can help you guys with all of that. So definitely reach out if there's any questions or concerns.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, listeners. We'll be back again next week.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.